Welcome to AHRC TV Weekly Roundup's Milestone 50th episode. I'm Jessica Fernando. Last week, AHRC TV provided exclusive coverage of the third meeting of the Asian Alliance Against Torture and Ill-Treatment held in Hong Kong. In this week's program, AHRC TV interviews some of the participants who reflect on the significance of the discussions, placing the meeting in a larger perspective. Farooq Hamid Naek, a Pakistani senator, shares his views on the meeting and the international community. Eran Wickramaratne, a Sri Lankan Member of Parliament, describes what he learned from his time in Hong Kong. Joanne Prud'Homme from Dignity, Denmark, explains the significance of such meetings beyond Asia. Dipendra Jha, a Nepalese lawyer and human rights advocate, shares his views.
Well, the shift is very good, and now this time we are discussing the torture which takes place in custody while in police station or otherwise by the state agencies. And the torture is interconnected and interrelated to corruption, and corruption is interrelated to good governance. And for good governance, you need a good government. And the government is outcome of the parliament, because the government is made up from the leader of the house or the majority party. He becomes the prime minister, and then he forms the cabinet. So it is all interconnected, and ultimately it is the election which matters. And if the people, through adult suffrage, a universal suffrage, elects honest parliamentarians with integrity and competency, then the parliament would be full of people who would legislate properly. For good, when there will be good legislation, beneficial legislation, then what would happen is the corruption would not take place. When the corruption would not take place, the torture would not take place. But it all boils down to electoral reforms, which are a must in every country, in the South Asian country, including Pakistan. Because if corrupt people are elected, they will not like corruption to finish, and they will not like torture to finish. But if honest and people who are dedicated to the people of their constituency are elected, that will go a long way for good governance and appointments on merit, and everything would happen. International pressure is very important too, but international pressure, see, like a country like Pakistan, country like India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, they're big. They've got big territories, vast areas, so international observers cannot go to every polling station, in the rural areas especially. They can only go to big cities, which are 3 or 4 cities. So the international people can come and see what is going on as far as the big cities are concerned. And in big cities already the people are educated and literate, and normally the rigging does not take place to that extent which takes place in the rural areas, where people are poor and illiterate. And over there the international observers do not go. So it all becomes a facade as far as the observation by the international observer is concerned.
The Asian Human Rights Commission continues to play a major role, not only in supporting victims of human rights in the Asian region, but also in expanding knowledge about human rights. And as a part of that, they also try to bring parliamentarians together from various parts of Asia, increase their knowledge, share the experience of Hong Kong, and also give the parliamentarians an opportunity to share their experiences with each other. And I think this is a very valuable opportunity, and I'm hoping that more and more parliamentarians from the Asian region could actually get together. We parliamentarians have a role in actually getting Parliament to approve more resources so that people in the criminal justice system are better remunerated, better trained, and they have the working environment and the technology that's needed. But in these deliberations over the last 3 days, we went beyond that to say that alone won't change the system. We have to work at building the public's confidence in the rule of law and in the public justice system. If we do not do that, our societies could collapse. So it was an important and useful meeting. We are taking these thoughts back. We hope to work together as parliamentarians across cross-border with common values for a common goal. We have come to Hong Kong at a very interesting time, particularly when there are demonstrations in Hong Kong, in the central occupation demonstration, led by students who are basically asking for their right to elect their chief executive, whereas the chief executive, they think, is being currently unfairly being imposed on them. It's very interesting just to observe the demonstrations, because the police role in the demonstration is so very different to our experience in our parts of the world, including Sri Lanka, where I myself have been in several demonstrations, being dispersed by police charges, and also with the shooting of tear gas canisters. The demonstrations are extremely peaceful. The police's role is very clear. The police's role is not to safeguard those in authority and power, but actually to safeguard the public, which is a very important, clear distinction, and how the police is actually responding to the demonstration. The student leader, who actually was catalytic in the demonstration, was taken into custody for a short period of 46 hours. And the prosecution asked for him to be continuously detained because of the unrest it was creating. And it was very interesting to know that the judge had said that holding him in custody was actually what was leading to the unrest, and therefore released him. And the demonstrators continue to be there in the central area. And I had the privilege of actually going there and observing the demonstration for about 3 hours, to see how peacefully it was done.
Well, I would say it's extremely encouraging to see that there is such a strong engagement from the parliamentarians and the politicians who participated. I think it shows a real commitment to addressing the issue of torture. And I also think it shows a real commitment to addressing more broadly the issues of rule of law that plague a lot of the countries that were represented here. I think it's really an opportunity that can be seized upon to try and further this. There's a momentum that built up over 4 days. And the level of engagement and the rigorous discussions that you just described, I think, are a very important moment for the anti-torture movement in Asia. Comparing it to other areas where I work, I would say that many of the issues that were addressed here are the same that we see in many of the countries we work in. I work a lot on Tunisia, and of course the situation there is different because there has been the recent revolution in 2011. The appetite for reform and change is very much on the table. I mean, people have a desire to effect change that's actually meaningful and not just window dressing. However, even though it's been 4 years since the revolution, many of the reforms that were hoped to have happened by now haven't institutionally. So we still see a lot of corruption, we see lack of accountability, impunity. So those are the same issues we've been talking about here. And I think that for me, to bring the debates that we've had here to Tunisia is also going to be very helpful in order to broaden the work with the partners that we work with out of just the anti-torture movement and into broader rule of law issues.
I think this meeting is an eye-opening for me. I visited many meetings in US and Europe, but this really touched me because I talk with a parliamentarian from Bangladesh, from Pakistan, from Sri Lanka, from Philippines, and we see that we are having the same problem of electoral system, the same problem of feudalism in the politics. So I'm very much interested that we need mass mobilization, the youth mobilization to make changes, because we are having the similar problem. So we are thinking it's a kind of sharing experience and showing solidarity because we are having the same problem.
The Executive Director of the Asian Human Rights Commission, Bijo Francis, provides a prospective look with regards to the annual meeting and anti-torture work across Asia.
Well, it depends upon how you define what significant players are. The purpose of the meeting, the one and only aim of this meeting was to get across to some selected parliamentarians by virtue of their willingness to participate in the meeting. It shows that they are willing to take this forward in their countries. So to have a core group of participants who could come and talk and discuss and carry the discussions back into their countries to share with their peers and then see how much of that can be rooted in their countries is a challenge, and that we have a critical mass which was here to initiate that discussion and to get them involved in the discussion was the purpose of the meeting. So the purpose of the meeting in that sense was met, and it was calculated also, and it was expected. Whereas one could say, if you go through the countries that were represented, I think there is still the possibility of more countries to be included in this. But I think if you get to the crux of the nature of the participants or the expanse of the participants, it is true that we could actually incorporate more participants from other Asian countries. But there is also this concern that we get to have access to politicians in the countries who agree with the main theme of the discussion, and such number of politicians are unfortunately not many. So those who have come have been with us for the last 2 meetings as well. So it is good that we had them at least, and perhaps in the next meeting, subject to also availability of resources, we might be able to expand the number of participants. Dealing with the question of torture, when it comes to the practical nuances of engaging on the question of torture, you are actually engaging with very localized, very established, very rooted power structures. So this involves an influential person in the locality, maybe a minister, maybe a politician, maybe a rich person, maybe a mixture of all the three. The arm of the law, the person or the uniformed cop who can arrest a person on suspicion and has the entire machinery of the state to back that arrest by procedure, by logistics, and by law. So when you deal with the question of torture, it is very challenging to get across to people who agree that, well, we have something really wrong in our criminal justice institution or in the setup of our criminal justice institutions. And as a politician, as an elected member, as a person who has a say in the national polity to reform the institutions, to take the country forward, to listen to the demands of the people for justice, to get those people agree to this position, and furthermore to travel great distances to come and share their ideas is something which is very unique. If you ask me what is the outcome of the meeting, the outcome is this, that today we have a group of parliamentarians, a group of politicians, many of them very senior politicians, having the history, political history of being the law minister of a country or one of the most prominent politicians of the locality, who is willing to sit across Asian Legal Resource Center and its partners a table and then discuss with you why dealing with torture is important, why criminal justice institution reforms are important, why I have to work for this, and further accepting that it is also my responsibility as a politician to work on this issue in the country. And that is an enormous challenge. And I think we have achieved that challenge. Now the question before us is how we can work with those who we identified and have come to us in partnering in this mission to expand that number, so that at the end of the day we will be able to develop a critical mass which can take this mission further in the countries. So that will be the way forward for a meeting like this. As I said, we should be ideally able to identify a few more politicians who are willing to come along with the familiar figures that we have already, and slowly get that debated in their legislative houses, so that today it is one person who might carry the message of AHRC and its partners. Tomorrow we expect a few more who would be there in the people's houses, in the parliaments or in the assemblies or in the senates, who would be standing up and asking questions regarding criminal justice institutions. And that is the achievement that we hope we will be able to make within the next 12 months.
Before closing this week's episode of the Weekly Roundup, AHRC TV would like to thank all the individuals and activist groups that have made it possible for AHRC TV to reach this milestone. AHRC TV appreciates the help from supporters, contributors, and viewers across the region, as well as the Asian Human Rights Commission staff in Hong Kong. AHRC TV promises to continue covering critical human rights issues across Asia, providing insight from those fighting for a better world. That is all for this Weekly Roundup. Thank you for watching and see you next week.